Heather here? Don't see her. Virginia Lou?
Present.
So you have up to 6 minutes.
Citizens of Austin, members of the City Council, staffers, and others, Merry Christmas, everybody. Really is the season of giving here, and I hope you guys keep in line with that. Instead, what I see in this resolution is a spirit of taking away from the public the right to speak to their own government, Mr. Mayor, who's now walking off the dais, about these important issues that you guys vote on. I hope you guys don't end up being the Grinch, and I hope you look more into this resolution and consider it seriously before you vote on it. I know you guys have now had 3 work sessions about this. The first one I know was an hour long, where you guys kept referencing a certain situation that caused you to do this. Mr. Riley, who I approached at camp on Monday, asked him about it, and he seemed to act like he didn't know what I was talking about, even though he sat in on all these meetings, so I was really disappointed with that. I'm going to give you guys a brief lesson before I go into this about what's consent and non-consent. This is an item to establish interim council meeting procedures. Now, the bulk of the procedures we have currently have been in place largely since 1992. There's no reason to have interim procedure. You guys have been on council now. I know there's some new members, but you guys have been on there for months or years, and there's no need for interim procedures. Basically, a brief lesson on the consent agenda item. What is the definition of consent? Well, consent agenda is everything you guys vote on in one vote at the very beginning of the meeting. When an item, such as item 51 here, is pulled due to an excess of speakers or a council member's request, it then becomes a non-consent agenda item. And the city code specifically states that persons are not limited on testifying on non-consent agenda items. And that's why I find this so dangerous. First, we have a procedure in place now that's very good. I like the policy now. You can sign up to when the item's heard. Now you have to sign up 15 minutes prior, thanks to Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Spellman. And I find this a limit on the citizens. It's a check trying to make it harder to get involved and to speak to our own government. And we need to defend our right to speak to our own government. That's the whole reason why we have government. Also, a part of this says, if an individual is the only person registered to testify on an item on consent which has not otherwise been pulled, it will remain part of consent. That's how it works now. But it says the person registered to testify will only be allowed to speak one time for up to 3 minutes on the consent agenda as a whole, which is often dozens and dozens of items, 50, 60 items usually. And in addition, the person will be registered to speak one time, up to 3 minutes as a whole, regardless of the number of items which that person has signed up to speak. In addition, your guys' false interpretation of what constitutes consent and what constitutes non-consent, you have another provision in here that says a person other than a council member may not participate in removing more than 3 items from the consent agenda for a single meeting. It says that it applies only to items that are removed from the consent agenda solely on the basis of the number of persons who have registered to testify, and that the first 3 numerically listed items they have registered to testify on or donated time on shall be considered purposes for this limitation. Now, as I explained earlier, non-consent, an item becomes non-consent when it's pulled off and has its separate hearing and separate vote, as this one, as the ones you guys considered prior. So I find this a real way to discourage citizen involvement, basically deny citizen involvement on non-consent agenda items, seeing how the city clerk and others have interpreted this. Now, you guys should be encouraging citizen participation. We should set the paradigm for other cities throughout the state and the nation. We need to encourage citizens speaking in their council. I want you guys to be the leader in preserving our rights. But again, I'm highly disappointed by this resolution sponsored by Mrs. Morrison and Mr. Spellman. They say it's a compromise resolution, but it's not a compromise at all. The rules we have in place now are fine. They work well, and there's really no dispute about them. So I don't even understand why we're establishing council interim procedures when you guys have had these in place for nearly 20 years now. Let's see, got a little more time here. Basically, we have checks in government to check the power of government. We're not supposed to put checks on the people participating in their government or communicating information to council. No, they need to be encouraged. The real check of government is supposed to be on you, Mr. Mayor, on you, council, on our elected officials. And that's the whole purpose of having checks. That's the whole purpose of having law. Law is a negative. Most laws say, thou shalt not. It doesn't say you shall do this or that. It says, thou shalt not. That's the basis of law. And we need to check you guys, our elected officials, not people who vote for you guys, pay the taxes, and then get ramrodded and don't get allowed to speak at council on important information they have to communicate to you guys. So I find this to be a despicable resolution. I hope you guys don't end up being the Grinch here, taking away from citizens what is rightfully theirs. So we're going to go to the voters with this issue, and we've heard very strongly that the people are not happy with further limits being placed on them, and we will work to repeal this law if it is passed. I find it a terrible precedent to set, and I hope you do the right thing, Austin City Council, and say no to this ridiculous legislation. Thank you so much for your time.
We also have signed up against not wishing to speak or